What's going on, guys? Welcome to kind of a pilot episode here on the Good Mike Work Commentaries YouTube channel. I'm decided to try to do a news break segment every now and then to kind of come up here and discuss some breaking news that might happen from time to time, any big sort of, wrestling news, wrestling departure, contract situations, big, pay-per-view-ish type of episodes that we saw last night on AEW or ratings news or anything like that that might warrant an extra special video from time to time. I decided to try to put something like that together so I can come up here at a moment's notice and discuss these things when they happen. I don't know how often the news break segment is going to be here, but I'm going to try to come up and do these as often as I can. But there's going to be a couple of conditions to being able to do these videos. Number one, the news has to be big enough to do a separate video on. And number two, I need to be available, meaning I need to be home, away from my other job or whatever. So I don't know how frequent these are going to be, but I thought today would be a fun day to kind of test out a pilot episode. And we'll just be up here for a few minutes, nothing long, maybe 30 minutes at the most, discuss a little bit of blood and guts last night. I want to talk about the rating that just came in for AEW, #1 on cable, and we will discuss as well Daniel Bryan's WWE contract situation that was revealed earlier this week to have expired, and I haven't been able to really talk about that aside from social media. So we're still going to be doing the podcast tomorrow night after SmackDown. By the way, the Winged Eagle podcast will be up one night earlier. I'm not going to be available to do it Saturday, so we're going to come up here tomorrow night after SmackDown instead, and we'll probably elaborate a lot more on this and some of the things we're going to talk about now tomorrow night. So we will still be here tomorrow night for the podcast, so keep that in mind, but I thought this would be a fun way to kind of come up early, say hi to a few of you guys. Hey, look at me, impromptu video. Nobody knew I was going to be up here today, and give you guys a brief rundown of what I thought of AEW Blood and Guts from last night. I want to address all of the crash pad critics out there as well. A lot of people who have things to say about Jericho and the bump he took and the way it was done and the way it was pulled off last night. And we'll talk a little bit about Daniel Bryan's contract expiring with WWE as well, and what that can mean and what his future is going to be, if he's going to wrestle, where he's going to wrestle, when he's going to wrestle, that sort of thing. So it should be a fun, just kind of laid back, casual discussion here as we talk about some of these issues from the past couple of days, and to hang out with you guys on a fun Thursday afternoon. Hope you guys are doing all right. I have not done any sound checks, so let me make sure you can hear me. I think so. There we go. Okay, I can be seen. Yeah, and I'll probably, this will tighten up more as we go and as I get used to kind of doing these news break segments, but it's been something that's missing from the channel for quite a while, and I wanted to kind of have like just an overlay or a template ready just to go up live if I needed to, if something big happened, instead of doing, a special standalone video or waiting to the podcast. So that's going to be the deal going forward here. Hopefully you will see me from time to time doing these videos whenever we get some big news. So anyway, let's get into what we're going to talk about here, because this isn't going to be the type of video where we're going to waste a lot of time. Anytime I do these, I'm probably going to come right up here, start talking about what we need to talk about, and then get out of here. And of course, hang out with some of you guys in the chat as well and answer some questions possibly. So let me know what you think about this going forward. I'll try to do these, like I said, as much as possible. And a quick little programming note for you, for those of you just tuning in now, I will be up here tomorrow night after SmackDown for the Winged Eagle podcast one day early, because Saturday for me is booked. And I had told you guys last week that I was likely not going to do a watch along this Sunday because it's Mother's Day. I'm going to be very busy at work, but I should be home in time to bust one out. So I'm not entirely sure which one I'm doing yet, but there will be a watch along on Sunday, and that link will probably be posted tonight or tomorrow. I'll be working on that here. So by the time we get to tomorrow night's podcast after SmackDown, I will have that information for you on what we're going to do a watch along on Sunday. And I think I've got a couple ideas. It might be a King of the Ring, but I've got a couple of really good shows that I'm kind of choosing between, and I think you guys are going to like whichever one I pick. So if you were looking forward to hanging out with us again on Sunday, good news, we will be here for that. So I'll shut up now and get into the wrestling news. I want to talk about AEW Blood and Guts last night. Now, I'm not going to talk about everything. We're only going to talk about the main event. We'll elaborate a little bit more on the show in tomorrow's podcast, but the big news coming out of last night was the main event, the big Blood and Guts War Games match between the Inner Circle and Pinnacle that was really built beautifully. They did an excellent job setting this up on the go home last Wednesday, and we've all been looking forward to this for the better part of a year, or more than a year now, because the original Blood and Guts match was scheduled right before the pandemic, or right after the pandemic last year, and they kind of scrapped it. So now we've set ourselves up here in a perfect situation with the Pinnacle and Inner Circle to do this match. And it was going to be really interesting to see like how it looked, how close to the War Games concept it was. And it really was the same thing. I mean, I know in WWE or in NXT, they've been doing, more than 2 teams involved in it, but really the overall rules are the same, the double, the 2 rings and the cage over top and all of that. And they mentioned on commentary several times last night throughout the match that this was Dusty Rhodes' idea. So it does kind of suck that AEW doesn't own the rights to War Games, because I would much rather them have it. NXT does a great job with it, don't get me wrong, but it just feels like more appropriate to be with the Rhodes family, but it was still, regardless of what they call it, I thought the match came off really well. There were a couple of complaints. One of the bigger glaring complaints that I saw last night on social media when I was at work, kind of eyeballing my phone and seeing how it was going, is there were some complaints about the commercials. But, what do you expect? I suppose they could have worked something out where they went commercial free, but when you have a 30-minute main event or a 35-minute main event, whatever it was, you're going to have some commercials in there, and at least you have picture in picture, as Jim Ross would say, and it didn't look like anything crazy was happening during the commercial breaks, but a lot of fans said that it kind of interrupted the flow a little bit. They got really jacked for a couple of spots, and then they'd go to commercial, kind of killing their buzz, so to speak. So I suppose I could understand that critique a little bit, but when I watched it back last night, I didn't have a whole lot of problem with it. I mean, I was happy that it was on TV. I mean, these same people that are complaining about the commercials are the same people saying, oh, it's not worth $50 to buy an AEW pay-per-view. Well, it's one or the other, motherfucker. So it's like you have to have something here. And I understand that if it's going to be on their Wednesday night show, you are going to have to deal with commercials. Maybe they can look at this and say, okay, maybe the pacing of the commercials, that doesn't work out so well. If we ever have another situation like this where we have to have a match like this, maybe we'll do something to where we do all our we'll front load all of our commercials in the first hour, allowing us that time at the end to not have any commercials, or maybe at least keep it to like the last 15 minutes of the show, do no commercials, something like that. So maybe that's something that they can improve upon. But in terms of the overall match, if you're going to have a long War Games match with 8 guys involved, and it's going to be on TV, commercials are just going to be a fact of life on that. But overall, I still thought the match was really good. It was extremely violent right out of the gate. I think it was Dax and Sammy, I know, that started it off. I'm pretty sure Dax was opened up literally right away. So the blood was all over the place, stained on the mat very early on in the match. And in terms of the brawling and the action and everything we saw in there, that was all a lot of fun. And, I thought when they got to the ending, that's where you started seeing some of the problems, because everything that was going on in the match, the stories being told with Sammy, the way he started in FTR and LAX, and then the Wardlow and Jake Hager stuff, and of course MJF and Jericho, and coming in one at a time like that. I was into it by that point. I really thought that this was going to end well, and it felt like it was going to end well. Now, I think they made a couple of mistakes near the end when they went to the finish. Now, this was essentially the WCW Fall Brawl 1997 finish. This is the exact same thing they did. I watched that on pay-per-view. It was in Winston. It was in my own home state of North Carolina, but I didn't go to the show. And it was the deal where that was when Mr. Perfect or Kurt Hennig, the whole My Spot thing, and that's when Kevin Nash dressed up as Arn Anderson. All that shit led up to their War Games match. And it was Mr. Perfect getting Arn Anderson's spot in the Four Horsemen in the War Games match. But really, it was all a ruse, and Mr. Perfect or Kurt Hennig was joining the NWO. So when it was Perfect's turn to enter for the Horsemen in War Games, he jumped in the ring, turned on the Horsemen, beat up Ric Flair. And that's when they took Ric Flair out to the side of the cage door, and Nash threatened to, or Perfect threatened to slam Flair's head in the door. And Nash told the Horsemen, hey, you better surrender, or Ric Flair here, he's going to be missing a head. And of course they surrendered. They said, okay. And then what did Kurt Hennig do? Slam the door on his head anyway. Same thing here, or essentially the same concept or idea here, which is not all bad. I did like what they did in 1997. That was a very cool finish. And I think this could have been equally as cool had it been maybe executed a little bit more. One thing I noticed in a situation like this last night more than anything else is that AEW is a company that's only a year and a half old. We all hate WWE's overproduction, their shaky-ass cameras, their 36 camera cuts for one suplex, shit like that. That gets annoying. But one thing they do know how to do is to really get the proper camera shots and angles when they need to. And there was a couple of times in this match, especially near the finish, that I thought the camera was focused on the wrong thing. For one, once MJF and Jericho got to the top, I think everybody else should have been like, they should have figured out a way, maybe Tully or someone like that locked everybody else back in the cage to where the Inner Circle members weren't on the outside of the ring or even climbing up to the top when MJF is threatening him. I think that was one issue that could have been better. One thing that I think they did really well was a lot of the camera shots from the top of the cage, especially when Was it MJF that had Jericho in the hold, or Jericho had MJF in something? Maybe it was the walls of Jericho or whatever on the top of the cage. But the kind of the wide shot of that I thought looked spectacular. The cage, the structure itself also looked very good. It wasn't, it didn't look all shoddy, and it looked different from WWE, to where they weren't just copying how WWE lowers a cage and sets it up. There were some differences to it. And on the top, they almost had that little like walkway, or like a lot of more support on the top, similar to the fight pit, kind of how the fight pit match has that kind of that terrace or that walkway around it. This one had a lot of room up there to move around and execute moves and stuff. So I liked a lot of that. But where I think it started falling apart was, number one, the finish, because during the finish, when MJF had Jericho kind of teetering on the edge there, number one, you could see they were saying so much shit to each other. There was a lot of stalling. There was a lot of talking going on there, and you could tell that they were setting up for something. And what I wish I would have been able to see this live, because I promise you, I would have been able to see it. To me, it was extremely obvious the whole time that even with MJF threatening to push Jericho off, he's still going to push him off regardless. To me, I feel like they really telegraphed that, and you knew Jericho was going to be taking a bump here. But another problem I saw was that that Proud and Powerful, Santana and Ortiz, are like on the cage. They're like climbing up it. And it feels like if they really, really wanted to, they could have ran up there, and stopped MJF or whatever, or at least got to the top of it to, create a little bit more obstacle for him. But I think with a lot of that, it would have been better off if they were locked in the cage and there was literally nothing they could do about it. Because at that point, they could have still technically, maybe they could have gone over there and caught Jericho, because they also telegraphed that with the with that big, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the big Tempur-Pedic mattress that they had setting out there. It stuck out like a sore thumb from the very beginning of the show. As soon as the show started, you're like, oh, someone is going to fall off the cage and land on that. It was extremely obvious. It was like literally looked like it was placed there for that very reason. They tried to disguise it as part of the set. Didn't fool me. Looked exactly like a crash pad to me, and that was going to be used in the main event, which is exactly what happened. So I think they should have maybe tried to make that a little bit less obvious, and also keeping the Inner Circle members in the cage. Another part of it that I thought could have been better, and one part that I thought was really good, when it came to who surrendered for Jericho, they picked the right guy, Sammy Guevara, because Sammy and him, les sex gods. Jericho's been somewhat of a mentor to him, even like a father figure, and Sammy has really stuck by Jericho's side through all of this. I had it wrong. Months ago, I had predicted that Sammy Guevara was going to turn heel and turn on Jericho and join with MJF, but Sammy Guevara really does have that loyalty. That came through in his character last night, and that might be something that that even stretches out beyond this. So Sammy being the guy to do the surrendering, I thought was perfect, but the camera angle, they missed it. They should, if this was WWE or if this was Kevin Dunn or something, they would have had that camera zoomed right in on Sammy's scared shitless face. Please don't kill my grandpa. I'll do anything. Fine. I surrender, whatever. They missed that whole shot. Basically, I think the camera was behind him, and they were basically filming his back when he surrendered. So I think little things like that WWE has so much more experience in getting those proper shots, because in a live environment, it's not like you can go back and retake this. So you have to have it right the first time with just rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, and WWE does a lot of that. Plus, they've got that little orangutan that's been sitting in the production truck for the past 40 years in Kevin Dunn that really knows how to get these shots and get them properly done and stuff. So, for all the faults that WWE's production has, that's one thing that they seem to excel in, and is getting those right proper shots. And I think there was about 3 different occasions here in the end of the match where AEW didn't get the right shot. But again, that's their inexperience. That's something that will get better in time, the longer they survive and the longer they grow and the longer they continue to produce live TVs and pay-per-views. They are brand new. I've said ever since the start, yes, AEW is going to show some signs of inexperience. They're going to show some, some instances where they might not look quite ready for prime time, but that can be expected overall for a company that's as young as it is, with the majority of the talent with very little or no TV experience at all. Yes, there's problems with the show from time to time. They're not all perfect, but they are still doing an extremely good job. And for a new North American promotion to come up and actually get ratings that are comparable to WWE right off the bat this fast, and is able to attract a lot of some of the bigger name talents that are out there in the world, that is all good news. And regardless of where you stand on the stupid imaginary bullshit war that the online morons have with each other, you just have to be a complete fool to not at least recognize that, and to be so goddamn stubborn and pigheaded that you won't look at fucking reality. So yeah, there was some issues last night that I think could have been better, but I think these are learning curves and learning experiences for AEW and stuff that they will approve upon in the future. Now, the other big glaring complaint and the big criticism from last night was with the bump itself, because we already had the problems with the surrender and some of the inner circle guys kind of being within arm's reach of MJF, and then for him to push Jericho off at the end after Sammy Guevara surrendered, after Pinnacle has officially won the match. And then he picks up Jericho and just shoves him right off, and Jericho falls through what was obviously a extremely padded crash pad. Now, there seems to be two sides to this, this craziness online. Of course, everybody got all uppity. The people who are anti-AEW are going to go really crazy about something like this because, much like we saw at the end of the barbed wire explosion match, it kind of ended with a whimper there. And I think this was better, but kind of along the same lines, and it was kind of a disappointing bump. Now, here's one thing that I want to plant a flag and say right off the bat. I am by no means saying that I want 50-year-old Chris Jericho to land on concrete. And I think a lot of the people who are basically barking back at the crash pad critics, I think they're looking at it as if the fans believe that Jericho should have taken a flat back bump on concrete. I know the wrestling fans are stupid. I don't think any of them, even the dumbest ones, really want that for Chris Jericho. I don't think that's really what the critics meant. I didn't like the way the crash pad looked and the crash pad bump looked. But I have no issue at all with safety. So what I think they should have done is what I talked about earlier. Maybe adjust a camera angle. Maybe have it more of a wide shot, or maybe something to where you don't see Jericho hit. You could even do that, where he lands and then the camera cuts right down to him. And then if you do show a replay, make sure the replay is of a very wide shot to where it literally doesn't look like he's falling through cardboard, because they had that textured metal that was just cardboard or decals, almost like stickers placed down to make it look like it's a steel grating or set piece or something like that. But when Jericho fell through it, you could tell it was just driftwood or cardboard that he had crashed through with a very, very large mattress of some kind underneath. So my issue with it isn't that they took precautions for Jericho. I want him to land in a bouncy castle down there. I have no problem with however soft you want to make that. Protect the talent first. We don't need another Mick Foley out there, just destroying his body. We kind of got a little bit of that in the earlier part of the show when Darby Allin threw himself down a flight of stairs or got thrown down a flight of stairs. Mick Foley took a bump like that, but Darby Allin doesn't have the cushion that Mick Foley does to take these bumps. He is just skin and bones, and that's it. And he's being thrown down flights of stairs and shit. So, with Jericho, it's a different deal. This guy's older, he's a 50-year-old, and if you want to throw him off of something, you need to be extremely careful. Not everybody is fucking nuts like Shane McMahon, who just wants to fall off shit. WWE has done a lot of crash pad stuff before too. We've seen it. I was at one of the biggest crash pad spots in history at SummerSlam 2000 when Shane McMahon dove off that scaffolding and landed on Steve Blackman. But what did they do? They gave you mostly a wide shot. They did give you one close-up, and you could tell there was a little spring to it, but I think they concealed it enough to where the fan can suspend their disbelief. And when you have a bump that kind of didn't look as impressive as maybe fans would have liked, I think that's where some of the fans get an issue with it, is that it's hard to suspend your disbelief when it really literally looks like he landed on a cushion. So I am in no way, shape, or form saying Chris Jericho should have landed on concrete or taken any sort of unnecessary risk at all. I think the execution in terms of the camera angles and whatnot, or maybe even where the pad was located. They basically had that thing front and center on the stage instead of maybe off to the side, maybe a little more dimly lit. If you noticed, it was extremely bright, and Jericho landed on that big, bright metal, decals, cardboard decals that he landed on. And it was all very visible, all the holes and all the flaws in it. So I'm not going to let that take away from the match. I thought the story was well told. And even though they kind of did a rehash of Fall Brawl 97, I liked Fall Brawl 97, and I liked the finish they did there. And going back and doing something like that, especially in a match where to achieve victory, you must have the other team surrender, then that's a pretty good way to do it. Threaten to kill one of the motherfuckers, and yeah, okay, I guess we have to surrender. We have no choice. So the story there with the Pinnacle, with the Inner Circle, and the great shots. And we just talked about camera shots earlier on. The great shots at the very end after Jericho had taken the bump of a very, very bloody MJF standing on top of the cage and the look on his face, and he looks down at Jericho and says, "Thank you," and all of those closing shots with MJF celebrating on top of the cage, I thought looked fantastic. And to me, just those shots alone almost made up, for anything that went wrong earlier. So I'm more than willing to admit some of the maybe some of the issues in this main event here, but overall, I still liked it. I thought it was very well done, and I just think that it sucks for AEW that a couple of these blunders have been made that have taken away from really, really excellent matches, because before those firecrackers went off in the Moxley and Omega match, that was a good match. And before everything they did at the end of this happened, this was also a very, very good blood and guts match for AEW's first crack at the War Games concept. I thought it was a success. Definitely things I would have done differently, but I certainly wouldn't call this any sort of catastrophic failure or anything like that. But in the end, it had some issues, and that was what was sparking a lot of the debate online, and people. So, and then people who are complaining about the crash pad, others are thinking that they are saying that Jericho should be taking a bump. It's not really that. I'm sure there might be some assholes out there that think that Jericho should have taken a flat back bump onto concrete. I'm sure people that dumb exist. I will admit that. But that's not what everybody is thinking, and it's certainly not what I'm thinking. I just kind of wish they would have tightened up the camera shot or something like that to give it a better look, to where it looked more real. That's all. Without endangering anybody's lives, there's ways to make it look more real without putting Jericho at more risk. Lighting and camera angles could have done wonders in a situation like this. So they'll learn from this, but I do think it kind of sucks a little bit that their barbed wire explosion match and this have had these two things attached to it, which I think is taking away from what was a good match prior to that. So hopefully these are things that won't happen in the future, because I'd hate to see these guys go out there, kill themselves, bleed buckets out there just for the fans to be talking about one, at the end of the day, pretty insignificant, critique. Yes, it looked a little fake, but newsflash, wrestling's fake. Not sure if you noticed. So it's like I can give them a break on that. I'm not using this to crucify AEW. I'm still going to watch them and give a shit. They're still until they stop entertaining me. I'm not going to stop watching them. So, and really right now, compared to what we have to sit through every Monday night on Raw, this is a welcome change, and a nice breath of fresh air from time to time to be able to watch AEW. So I'm all cool with this. Now, this has also sparked some fun-loving trolling. Shotzi Blackheart tweeted out, I don't know, some gif of some woman falling out of bed or whatever. See, that's funny. And of course, fans start freaking out. I even read down some of the comments there. And what do these little idiotic motherfucking fans do when they see something like that? They start criticizing how she looks and her weight and this and that. And I'm like, motherfucker, why don't you look in the mirror? It amazes me how personal fans can take stuff like this. This was a lighthearted rib. These jabs between the two companies from time to time is fun for the fans. It's probably fun for the talent. Shotzi didn't mean anything, bad by it. She's just having a good time. And I think when you have some playful trolling back and forth between talent, that's fun. And there's no reason to get your panties all up in a wad over this. If you're one of these AEW crazies, guess what? I'm an AEW crazy. I got an AEW belt right there. I got an AEW hoodie. I watch their show every week. I'm very, very much invested in their success. I want there to be another competitor out there other than Vince here in North America. That is absolutely essential for the survival of the business. So to reject that, you're letting your personal stupid feelings and what other people are influencing you on social media to dictate your own thinking. And I'm not going to do that. I love AEW to death. But at the same time, I'm going to enjoy if they fuck up when the other side gives them hell. That makes both sides better. And plus, this is so minor. It's just Shotzi Blackheart. Sammy Guevara drove a fucking tank to the Royal Rumble, didn't he? Isn't that her gimmick? So I think that when these two sides do this stuff, it's actually fun and not bad. And there's no reason if the companies and the wrestlers involved in this aren't pissed about it and are just having a good time, why can't the fans have that same good time? Why do they have to take it so seriously? Why, when I woke up today, is all I'm seeing on Twitter still about this fucking crash pad? Lives, people. Go get them. Go get one before I break my own damn microphone. For God's sakes, man. At the end of the day, does this really matter? Is this really worth waking up and just barking and arguing incessantly with somebody, a complete stranger on social media, about something that doesn't fucking matter in the long run? So once again, social media always disappoints with their reaction to stuff. And it's just, it amazes me how easily a war can start, or a war of words can start over something so fucking ridiculous. And that would continue because just about an hour or so ago, Bryan Alvarez dropped the rating, or at least I saw it from him first, which was a 1.09 million. So they drew over 1 million viewers for Blood and Guts. That's a very good rating, and they were #1 on cable in that key demographic graphic. So Wednesday's show drew a 0.42 rating in the 18 to 49 demo, which is up from the 0.33 that they had in the same demographic last week. Now, granted, last week AEW didn't draw 1 million, but they were also going head-to-head with President Biden's speech. So that definitely took a hit. They didn't, every week that they've gone unopposed by another wrestling company or a president, they're drawing 1 million viewers. So last night is a very promising number, and getting the #1 spot in that demo is going to be a huge victory for them, because WWE's never come close to that. They don't break the top 50 most of the time. So that's pretty impressive there. And AEW finished #1 among the top 150 cable originals for Wednesday, even beating out The Challenge. I don't know what the fuck The Challenge is. That MTV? So it beat out The Challenge in terms of cable originals. So those are all positive. Those are positive ratings. That's positive news, for something like this, that AEW kind of gave you a pay-per-view-ish type of Wednesday night. I like these theme Wednesdays that they've done from time to time. Instead of giving us a pay-per-view for $50 every month, you do these, it's kind of like how WCW did the Clash of Champions. It's very similar to that. So I kind of like that we have these themed shows, and we will see more of them, and they can always be counted on to spark, a pretty good rating and to give us possibly a title change or whatever. I like all of that. So this is all positive news at the end of the day for AEW. I'm sure they'd like to have a little bit of that main event back, maybe change some things up to make it better. But overall, they delivered a good wrestling show, and they got a good rating for their efforts. And I think that's nothing but good news. So to find negativity in that, or to find excuses or whatever, or to pick apart anything just because you cannot find it in your heart to give credit to AEW just because you don't like their fans, then there's really no helping you at this point. But all in all, would have had the match go a little bit differently if I'm in charge of it, but, still good stuff, and good work from all the guys. What do you think Jericho's future is going to be now? Do we not see him for a bit? We have Double or Nothing coming up in 3 weeks. Is he absent from Double or Nothing? Does he return at Double or Nothing? Seems to me like he's going to return at Double or Nothing depending on what MJF does. There's got to be some revenge there. At some point, MJF's going to want, I don't know if he's really in the position to be challenging Omega at this point, but I can almost see MJF maybe being in a match and Jericho returns and interferes, or we get Jericho and MJF just one-on-one again in another gimmick match, but that would have to put Jericho on TV awfully soon after he took what was supposed to be this potentially career-ending bump. Dean Malenko was out there and all the officials and stuff like that. So they really, really, really sold that it was a big deal. So I'm not sure, if we actually have the Double or Nothing is, I think, at the end of the month, right? The 30th or 31st. And if Jericho's not there, that's going to be a pretty big deal for him to not be there. So we'll see. Could be, okay, so he's starting his tour soon. Yeah, I'm not sure about COVID and all that, when touring can actually start. Usually when that happens, when somebody takes a big bump or takes some time off, especially somebody like Jericho, it usually is due to a tour. So if he's off going to go do something for a little while, that's something we've been talking about ever since last year. I thought this whole situation was going to go differently. I thought the Inner Circle was going to turn on Jericho and align themselves with MJF, and they were all going to beat him up, and then Jericho would just be off TV for a while and come back as a babyface. But they kept the Inner Circle together, and I kind of like that they did that nobody turned. Even in the even last week in the podcast, or Monday night when we were talking about Blood and Guts a little bit, I kind of predicted that it was going to take a defection. Sammy has just been so adamant how bad he hates the Pinnacle and MJF and stuff. And, maybe he's in cahoots with MJF. Maybe something's going on there, or maybe Hager turns on Jericho or whatever. I thought we were going to get a turn that was going to, spark this victory by the Pinnacle. But instead, they went with the Fall Brawl 97 finish, and it was what it was. But overall, good news for them. And we'll monitor Jericho's situation. I don't know if when he'll be back or what his future holds. And if he does not come back in the immediate future, if the Inner Circle stays intact, or if they just kind of agree to maybe go their separate ways until a reunion comes up or what, or if they still want to keep the faction going and keep it running while Jericho's away. Don't know. So should be interesting to see how all of that develops. What is this I'm reading from you? I was not aware. Nate, Greg, did you know we have 2 Dynamite episodes on Friday nights? No. What is that? Okay. May 28th and June 4th. No, I didn't. Okay, they might have talked about this last night. I still have to go watch a little bit more of last night's show. They must have made that announcement. I was not aware of it. So they're getting bumped. I get what, for basketball or something? Okay, so May 28th and June 4th. Those are apparently Friday nights, and Dynamite's going to be bumped to Fridays. Interesting. So they're going to be going, what, head-to-head with SmackDown? All right. That should be fun. Why not? Yeah, I didn't know about that, but I'll have all that info written down by the time we get to the podcast tomorrow night after SmackDown. You guys do me a favor, smash that thumbs up button for me if you don't mind, those of you who are here. The other news I want to get into is what transpired earlier this week with Daniel Bryan. Now, Fightful Select broke a story on yesterday or Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday, that Daniel Bryan's contract actually expired after the match with Roman Reigns last week. So he is officially gone from WWE with no contract. This is not what we thought. We originally thought that he had a little bit of time left on his deal, and this was maybe a way to give him a farewell tour, a retirement tour, or something like that, or some sort of a nice send-off, or maybe even possibly let him go out on his own terms. And one of the things that I was really hoping for and speculating on is that if he had a few months left on his contract, for some reason the month of September kept coming up. I don't know why people thought that, but apparently that was just the rumor that was around, that it was sometime later in 2021. When you think about it, he's been back, didn't he come back at WrestleMania in 34 in 2018? And 3 years, 3 years almost exactly. And then his contract is now up. So we thought it was going to be later this year, which sparked speculation about what he could do. Could he turn up on Raw, which would suck? Or could he go to NXT and just have a whole shitload of dream matches before he retires? But now it's a whole different situation because he's not under contract at WWE at all. So that has sparked a lot of debate about what he could do. A lot of people have opinions. A lot of people think they know or feel like they have an idea of what he's going to do. And he literally has options out the ass. He can do anything now. Now, if it's up to me, I would love to see him in AEW. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like he's been pretty loyal to WWE through all of this. Even when he was struggling to get cleared and you felt like he might be unhappy or whatever, he's really, they've done right by him. They've treated him like a big deal. This is a guy that was in the WrestleMania main event 3 weeks ago. I think if WWE was really concerned that this guy is immediately going to go to Dynamite and appear on Wednesdays, I'm not sure if they're putting him in that situation. So I don't know what's going on internally between the two sides, but I would think there's got to be some sort of an understanding there. Both sides kind of know what the other is going to do, or they probably talked about this, I guess. But before we talk about the obvious possibility, which I think is staying in WWE, there are some possibilities that maybe he could have some fun with this. Maybe Daniel Bryan is that special of a talent that he can say, Vince, I'm going to go to AEW and I'm going to work for the summer on a pay per appearance deal, and then I'm going to come back here in the fall and sign a new contract with you or whatever. Or maybe Daniel Bryan, that's a little bit unrealistic, going to Impact or AEW or New Japan. Anybody in that AEW family right now, I think that's a little bit unrealistic. I would like to see Daniel Bryan do a couple of matches in New Japan. That would be fucking fantastic, but I don't have my heart set on that. I think there's enough in WWE to where he can still do, basically, as long as you keep Daniel Bryan away from Monday Night Raw, he should be fine in WWE. And I'm really, really eyeballing that NXT. As cool as it would be to see Daniel Bryan on Wednesdays, I'd almost rather see him on Tuesdays, to be honest, because I think that would be equally as cool. So now that he has no contract, we can talk about that. I think another fun option for Daniel Bryan is maybe he could be the guy they could start bridging the gap between WWE and working with other promotions, namely Ring of Honor, because of all his history there. And WWE, there was the story that broke last week about them in talks with MLW, and they could be now saying, oh, we're seeing what AEW is doing, having all these working agreements. Let's get in on this action as well and at least try to work with the people that are left out there who haven't worked with AEW yet. And that could be MLW, and that could also be Ring of Honor. That might be fun to have Daniel Bryan kind of go back there, make an appearance, maybe even do a match, but do it while being under WWE contract. That could be very possible as well. But I think it would be a lot of fun if Daniel Bryan was able to come back and work NXT or even NXT UK, but primarily NXT, just because of the matches he could have there and some of the opponents he has there waiting for him, like Gargano, like O'Reilly. We did see him and Cole mix it up before, but that would still be extremely fun. I think Daniel Bryan and Walter would be a match to remember. I think he could work with Ciampa. He could work with Thatcher. He could work with just a lot of guys, even Finn Balor again, even though I know I think we've seen that, right? So there's options there for him to stay in WWE. And now there's talk about, him potentially re-signing and extending his in-ring career. There's also talk about him wanting to go home and be with his family. He's got young children, and he's a young man and he doesn't want to wrestle into his 50s and break his body. This might be a great time for Daniel Bryan to take some time off as well. But you know what? He's kind of already done that too. He was already on the shelf with that neck injury. So, maybe he comes back on a more part-time deal. Maybe not like a Brock, but maybe more like a Jericho, where he was kind of in and out, work a stint, go away, work a stint, go away. That to me, that would be the best option for the wrestling fan. I'm not ready to see Daniel Bryan never wrestle again. And I don't think we have, because I think if Daniel Bryan was gonna have his last match, I would hope that we would know it. I would hope the fans could have that moment to say goodbye to him. And I would hope that actual fans would fucking be there if it happened as well. I think the Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns match was excellent last week on SmackDown, but it's still in the Thunderdome. So, I don't want to see Daniel Bryan kind of just go off, go off into the sunset like that, and just like with a whimper, instead of, something more meaningful that the fans can really appreciate and enjoy, and give our chance to say thank you to him and appreciate his career for what it was, because he's a unique talent, and he's one of the guys now that I think has a special relationship with WWE, and I think he could be considered in that category with guys like Edge or Jericho, or even a Goldberg or someone like that kind of comes in, and is viewed as a special talent. And I think he has that ability. So with that being said, I think the options are literally open for him to do all of these. I could easily see him sitting at home for a year, maybe even two, maybe even permanently with his family. I could see him coming back for a couple of matches and then hanging it up and saying his goodbye. I could see him saying, all right, Vince, I want to go out and have some fun for 2 years, or I want to go out and have some fun for a year. I'll be back. I want to go work in New Japan. I want to go work a Ring of Honor show. I might want to turn up in Dynamite. I'm not going to sign a contract with these people. I just want to go around, work some stuff, and get out there and, then maybe come back home to you, have a farewell run, go in the Hall of Fame, whatever. Or he could just, like a lot of people are speculating, just remain in WWE. Some people think he's already there. Some people think he's already got a contract, at least maybe not signed, but intended. And maybe that's the deal there. Daniel Bryan is just going to, take a little bit of time, and then he's just going to surprise us and turn up on NXT somewhere or whatever. So when I think of all the possibilities, I literally want them all to happen. I want Daniel Bryan to have a match in AEW and Ring of Honor and Impact and New Japan and NXT. I want all these to happen, but we have to be realistic about what's likely. And I think what the most likely thing is here, based on Daniel Bryan and his involvement now in WWE. He's married to Brie Bella, whose stepfather is Johnny Laurinaitis. Daniel Bryan was a big part of WWE's, last 10 years or so, with the story that he's had, the big moment he had at WrestleMania 30 and all of that. And, then being injured and coming back and winning the title. And this guy is plugged into situations to make things better. You ever notice that? WrestleMania 30, that thing sucked. Randy Orton, Batista, kill me. Put Daniel Bryan in it, one of the best WrestleManias of all time. Edge and Roman Reigns wasn't really cutting it. I thought Edge and Roman Reigns had everything we needed to get a good WrestleMania main event. I thought the promo work by Edge and the character of Roman Reigns, backed up by Paul Heyman, was going to be all the story we needed. But it wasn't. It wasn't enough. There was some things missing from it. What do? Stick Daniel Bryan in there. So he's somebody that I would assume Vince and the entire team of management and agents and everybody there really, really, really trusts as a just true consummate professional through and through. So it's not like they're going to be, it's not like they're going to not try to sway Daniel. It's not, I'll go do whatever you want. Well, we're fine with whatever. No, of course they're like, come on, come back. Well, we'll pay you a motherfucking arm and a leg. You can work part-time. And I guarantee you that as soon as Daniel Bryan does have his final match, he is a first fucking ballot Hall of Famer easily. So he's the type of guy, provided that he's not going in, that it wouldn't overlap with like Undertaker next year or something. He's the type of guy that I want to see, just like an Edge, just like an Eddie Guerrero, that goes in like, or a Shawn. I should not, Eddie's a bad example, Shawn, but somebody like as soon as they retire, boom, Hall of Fame. So he's that guy. And I think he's got enough. I think his reputation is strong enough to where he actually is a guy that I think, like I said, could go bounce around to a couple places and come back and be welcomed with open arms and wouldn't be booked in a spiteful way. Oh, you left us, so we're going to fucking bury you. They wouldn't do to Daniel Bryan what they did to Kurt Angle, because it's not the same situation. Kurt Angle left and spent his best years of his career somewhere else. I think that still stung Vince, that he technically spent more time in TNA than he did in WWE. And that's why I think a big part of the reason why Kurt Angle did not get the retirement that he should have gotten, because there's hard feelings still there. I don't think Daniel Bryan is going to put himself in that position, even if he goes and works elsewhere. I think he's always going to kind of return back to the WWE. He will be Hall of Famed and all of that. I think all that's going to happen. So he's one of those guys that I think WWE is going to say, whatever you want to do, we got your back. And that's that. So I basically just want to wish Daniel Bryan luck. I wasn't aware that last Friday was it for him. So that's kind of a bummer. My instinct tells me he's coming back. Maybe not full-time, part-time, but this idea that he's going to have one more match and quit, I just don't see it. Can't remember who said it to me on Twitter. Can't remember now. But somebody was like, oh, I see him having like a couple of international matches and then hanging him up. And I'm like, I would not have any really necessarily issue with that because I want Daniel Bryan to do what makes him happy. But I don't feel that. That's not what my instinct tells me. My instinct tells me that we're going to see him wrestling under a WWE umbrella again. But if it was up to me, it's NXT, NXT, NXT. They bring him to Raw. I don't care. I don't even want him to be there. I don't even want him to be near the Thunderdome on a Monday. Just keep him away from there. But NXT could be so much more fun, and it would be something that he could really get invested in and sink his teeth into. He's going to go down there and do this run, might be the last run of his career, the final in-ring contract he's ever going to have, and he's going to do his damnedest, to try to set up the business for the future as best he can, because that's what we've always known about Daniel Bryan and seen from him. He's tried his damnedest to get guys like Drew Gulak and others over on the main roster. That obviously doesn't work there. So maybe he can go down to NXT and just do what he can to just really, really help that talent. So I'd love it if he turned up there, and that's my number one. I think NXT number one, AEW 2, New Japan 3, and then maybe just doing something like with Ring of Honor, MLW, or whatever. Whenever working agreements begin with WWE, he'd be the perfect guy because of his prior reputation. He was already known as the best wrestler in the world prior to going to WWE. So he'd be a perfect guy to do that type of stuff when potential working agreements and forbidden doors get kicked open down the line. So what say y'all? What's Daniel Bryan's future? What's he going to do? Where's he going to go? What do you want him to do? I want him to do what makes him happy. That's all I'm going to say. So we'll keep our eye on it, and we'll elaborate more on it tomorrow night for the podcast. So I'm probably going to get out of here now. Wasn't intending on staying up this long. Thought this would only be a 30-minute quick stream, but this is kind of my pilot episode for my new news break segment that I'm going to try to incorporate into the channel from time to time when breaking news happens or, major news happens that I don't want to wait until the podcast to talk about, and I'm able to come up here and the stars align and I'm off and I'm not at work and I can do it. I want to have this ready to where I can come up at a moment's notice and talk to you guys about some stuff when it happens. So hopefully you will see much more of me doing this in the future. But before I get out of here, let me just cruise over here, knock out a couple super chats that were hanging out in the chat, and welcome and thank all of you for listening. I know I haven't done a lot of chat engaging, but thanks to Daniel and Danny and Melissa and Ungovernable and Jet the Hawk and Charlie and Dave and Ace and How Wheezy is here and Nicola and Ben. And we've got Stone Cold, and we've got Cerebrus and Michael and Godfather and Rorona and Mr. E and Nikita and Firecracker. Right on. Who else we got? Anime fans. Ryan Rhoda, Nate, Atomic Cody, Paulo, Ace, I think I got Ace. Chris Ludecki, Marcus, JP Reckless, good to see you. And Chris, thank you for the $5, dude. Appreciate that. I like how they found a way for Pinnacle to win, but keep the inner circle strong. It keeps the feud going in a logical way. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best way to do like a submission or a surrender angle is basically give them no choice. You know, by threatening to, you know, murder someone or kill their leader or whatever. It's, you know, that's one way to force somebody into surrender. So, yeah, instead of them just, you know, choking out Sammy and he gives up or something. I see what you're saying. It's definitely, I like the way it was pulled off. Like I said, the execution could have been a little bit better, but the story was great. Marcus Metcalf, appreciate the $2 from you. Good to see you. Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe, and CM Punk on the indies. All three of those guys can go and wrestle anywhere they want. How amazing is that to say out loud? You know, a lot of people thought we might see Samoa Joe turn up last night at Blood and Guts, maybe be a member of the Pinnacle to come help out defeat the Inner Circle. CM Punk, I don't know. If somebody wants to pay him $25 million for one shot, I think he'll do it. Until that happens, I think, you know, we might not see him, and Daniel Bryan as well. But those guys all being technically available and not in WWE is pretty incredible. I mean, if I'm Tony Khan, I'm at least making a couple phone calls. You know what I mean? Of those three, I'm at least making 2 of those phone calls. You can decide which 2, but it's pretty incredible when you think about that. Good to see you, Dan Price. How are you? And who's we got Mary. Good to see you as well. Right on. So anyway, that is going to do it for the news break. I just wanted to come up here and have a fun little pilot episode test run, see how I liked it, see what the audience was like, and if people tune into this stuff. Most of the time when I do these type of videos, they're not going to be pre-announced very far ahead of time. I think I announced it on Twitter 15 minutes before I went live, so you better subscribe. Make sure you do that. That way, if I do schedule one of these streams, you guys can be notified of that. Click that little notifications bell as well, so you can be notified when I'm up here doing this type of stuff, because I want to make sure you guys are here watching when I'm here. So anyway, you guys have a great rest of your afternoon. I will be up here tomorrow night after SmackDown, like I've been advertising the past couple of streams. I've got a busy Mother's Day weekend, and I'm not going to be available on Saturday for the podcast. So I'm off tomorrow night. I'm going to watch SmackDown live on Fox, and then after the show, we'll come up, we'll do a full review of SmackDown. We'll elaborate more on Blood and Guts here. We'll talk about Tuesday night's NXT. Whatever other wrestling news is floating around out there, we'll get into that as well. Maybe we'll have more Daniel Bryan news by then. We don't know. But we'll get into all of that tomorrow night, immediately following SmackDown, about 15 minutes after the show. We'll be live, and we'll hang out on a Friday night together. It should be a lot of fun. You guys have a great rest of your Thursday. Take care, and I'll see you in about 24 hours. Be cool.